Hey, welcome back to another snack time video. My name is Ben, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to set up a virtual environment in which you can use to dissect and detonate malicious software. Before we start, I do want to caution you that this does come with its own risks. Some malicious software is even designed to detect virtual environments and take different actions based off that information. With the methods that I'm going to show you, you should be relatively safe. However, the only way for you to be 100% sure that this software isn't going to infect any other device on your network is to execute it on a separate device that is completely air-gapped from your network. Air-gapped means no wireless and no physical connections to any networks. I've used the method that I'm going to show you to execute countless malicious software and never had a problem. However, that's not to say that you won't. So just keep that in mind as we move forward. I'll be adding chapters to the bottom of this video, so if you need to go back and rewatch a portion, it should be a little easier for you to do. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below. But if you're ready, let's set up our virtual environment. And at the end of this video, maybe we'll also detonate a couple of pieces of malware. So before we get started, we have several files to download. I'm going to be downloading VirtualBox, Windows 10, as well as pfSense and Remnux. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do the downloading and get that out of the way first. So let's hop into our browser and I'll show you where to pick up those files. And let's first download VirtualBox. And since I'm going to be doing this on Windows, I'm going to select Windows hosts. Now let's get our Windows 10 ISO. Back at Google, Microsoft makes this pretty easy these days. We're just going to type in Windows 10 ISO. Click on this very first link. And we're going to download our media creation tool. Now let's go to pfSense. It's pfSense.org. Let's go to download here. And for our architecture, let's select AMD 64. Installer will be ISO, and we're just going to download this. Now let's go and find Remnux. And I'm just doing the search at the top of my bar here. So I'm just going to type in Remnux. All right, now that we're at our Remnux website, let's go to download the Remnux VM. And we're going to select the VirtualBox OVA. And then click on the download OVA file from box. And simply click download. All right, now that we have our 4 files downloaded, let's start with VirtualBox. We're simply going to next our way through this installation. Okay, it's asking us if we want to run VirtualBox, and we do, so let's hit finish. Your installation may look a little different from mine, since I already have several machines already configured. Before we can build our Windows virtual machine, we do have to download the Windows 10 ISO. So let's minimize VirtualBox for now. And let's run the Windows Media Creation tool. Let's accept the license agreement. And since I don't actually want to install Windows 10, I'm going to create some installation media instead. Hit next. These settings are fine. Hit next. And now it's asking me if I want to do a USB flash drive or an ISO file. I want to do an ISO file. Next. Now it's asking me where I want to save this file. I'm going to save it to my desktop. And based on your internet speed, this may take a few minutes or a few hours. So I'll see you back here when it's all done. Alright, we're all finished. Our ISO has been saved to our desktop, and now we're ready to build our Windows 10 virtual machine. Let's click Finish. Now that we've restored VirtualBox, let's create our Windows 10 virtual machine. Let's click New. We're going to be calling this Flare-VM, but you can call it whatever you want. For the ISO, I'm going to drop this down, click Other, navigate to my desktop, and double click on my Windows 10 ISO. I'm also going to come down here and click on Skip Unattended Installation. and click Next. It's asking me to assign resources to this virtual machine. As you can see, I have a little bit of extra memory to spare, so I'm going to give this machine about 8 gigs of memory. And as far as processors, I'm going to give it 4. Next. Flare VM, which is what we'll be installing onto this virtual machine, does require a minimum of 60 gigabytes of space. However, I don't want to just go with the minimum, so I am going to assign this 80 gigs and click Next. Now we're ready to go and click Finish. Now I can see that my machine has been created. All I have to do now is simply power it on. I'm going to click Start. Once it's started, I can see that the Windows installation is already up and ready to go. I'm going to close out this notification window, and I'm going to quickly run through the Windows installation. For this next screen, I'm going to click I don't have a key because I haven't purchased a full-blown copy of Windows, since I'm only going to be using this virtual machine to detonate malware. I'm not using this as my full-time machine. Now it wants us to pick the edition of Windows that we're going to be running. I'm going to select Windows 10 Pro. For this next step, I'm going to hit Continue. Once we're done with the install, we'll go through the usual next. For this next part, we'll want to select Setup for an organization, and I'll show you why on the next screen. Next. So instead of signing up for a Microsoft account, I'm going to click on Domain Join instead. This will allow me to use a username and password. Flare does require that you set up a password. So I'm going to use the username of Flare and the password of password. I do have to set up some security questions, but you can make the answers whatever you want. I'm going to say not now. I'm going to turn off all of these options. Skip. Not now. For this next screen, I'm just going to X out of this, and now Windows is all set up. I do need to configure my guest software from VirtualBox. So I'm going to go up to Device and install Guest Additions. This will install all the VirtualBox drivers that I'll need. Now we'll run the VBox Windows Additions. All right, it wants to reboot our virtual machine. Let's go ahead and let it do that. All right, we're going to go ahead and sign in using password. Now let's shut down our virtual machine. Once it's powered off, I do want to show you something that's super amazing about working with virtual machines, and that's snapshots. So if I click on this little option here, go to snapshots, I'm going to take a snapshot, and I'm going to call this post Windows 10 installation. You can call it whatever you want. So if anything happens from here on out, I'll have this image that I can always revert back to. So if my Flare VM goes horribly wrong, the install completely messes up, I can revert back and without having to reinstall Windows 10. Speaking of Flare VM, let's go ahead and find that GitHub repo so that we can start following the instructions to get our virtual machine configured. If you just Google Flare VM, it should be the first thing that pops up here. And as we scroll down, we can see the requirements that we'll need. There's a couple of things that we're going to need to do before we're able to run the install, since this is going to be downloading what Windows Defender would be considering malicious. So we're going to need to permanently disable Windows Defender. So you can see your pre-installation here. We've done the install Windows 10. Now we need to ensure our requirements above are satisfied, including disable Windows updates, at least until the installation is finished, and disable tamper protection and anti-malware, Windows Defender, via group policy. So let's do the very first one here. Let's do our Windows updates disablement. And this is going to be an easy one. We're just going to pause it for 7 days. So we head back to our virtual machine. Let's go to details and let's start this up. Now let's follow the instructions from our GitHub page. Let's go to Start and Settings and Windows Update. We're going to pause for 7 days. Now our updates are paused. Next, we'll go back to our web page here and we'll have to disable all of our malware protection. All right, let's start by typing in Windows Security, opening up our Defender window. Let's go to Virus and Threat Protection and Manage Settings. Let's uncheck all of these options here. Tamper protection is already disabled. Another thing that you can do is you can add the entire C drive as an exclusion area, and that will make sure that, if that does get turned back on, that the C drive is excluded. We click Add an Exclusion here, go to Folder, go to this computer, select the C drive, and hit Select Folder. Next step is to open up our local policy editor. I'm going to do a Windows R to open up the Run dialog and type in gpedit.msc. Once we have that open, we'll continue to follow the article. We'll go under Computer Configuration, Windows Components, scroll down and find Microsoft Defender Antivirus. I'm going to adjust this here. Find real-time protection, and it says enable turn off real-time protection. So we're going to double click this. We're going to enable this option. Hit OK. So from here, let's go back to Windows Defender Antivirus. Let's find that control with the turn off Microsoft Defender Antivirus. Let's double click on that and let's enable it. And let's click on OK. All right, now it wants us to reboot our computer. So let's reboot our VM. Now we're back up. Let's check our Defender status. Let's go to Search, click on our Windows Security here, and we can see that virus protection is managed by our organization. If we click in, we can see that no active antivirus is running, and our device is vulnerable, which in this instance is a good thing. All right, we are good to go, but it is suggesting we take another snapshot before we start our install, which is good because I don't want to have to do the policy thing again. So let's shut down. Let's go back to our snapshots. We'll take another one. We'll call this one Post Windows Defender Disabled. And now we'll go back to our details and we'll fire up our computer. For this next step, we are going to be setting up our Flare VM. So if you have any sort of firewall protection that scans your traffic, you may run into some issues here. For most home setups, that's not going to be a problem. And let's go ahead and start the install. Once we're signed in, I'm going to launch Microsoft Edge. And now I'm going to do a quick Google search for Flare VM. Doing it this way because I'm going to be copying and pasting several commands, and it's usually easier to do that from within your VM. So this one is saying open up a PowerShell prompt with administrative access. I'm going to do a search for PowerShell, and I'm going to click on Run as Administrator. I'm going to click Yes, and I'm going to move this window out of the way a little bit. So it wants us to download the installation script. I'm going to navigate to my desktop. And now I'm going to run this command. So I copied it and I'm going to right click to paste. No errors is good. We now have to unblock the file so that it can run. All right, and we have to modify our execution policy so that it will allow us to run this script. And finally, we're now able to run our script. I'm going to enlarge this a little bit so that you can see it. Now it's asking us if we've taken a VM snapshot to ensure that we can revert if there's something happened. And so yes, we did. So we hit Y. Now it's asking us for our password for our user flare. I'm going to type that in, password. So after a few minutes, you'll be prompted with this little custom installation window. I'm just going to leave the defaults for now. So let's go ahead and click on OK. Now this process is going to take a while, especially if you have a slow computer. I mean, we're talking probably hours. So we are going to come back to this a little bit later on, after we've set up our pfSense and our Remnux, and even then it's going to be still running. Our next step is going to be setting up pfSense. pfSense is a software firewall, and it's also something that we can run virtually so that if we do need to give internet access to our Flare VM, we can do so in a manner that prevents it from being able to access IP addresses that are on our private network. So let's click on New. Let's give it a name. I'm going to be just calling this something simple. I'm just going to be calling it pfSense. For my ISO, I am going to have to extract this guy. It's currently in a GZ format. Once extracted, it'll be in this folder on our desktop. So let's go to ISO, Other, double click on pfSense, and double click on the ISO. So hit Next. This does require a minimum of 1 gig of memory to function normally. And as far as processors, 1 is fine. If you can give it 2 if you have those to spare. I'm gonna hit Next. The default space allocation is 8 gigs. However, that's minimum for pfSense. I'm gonna give it 12 just in case we need to add any sort of plugins to our pfSense installation. I'm going to click Next, and I'm going to click Finish, but I'm not going to start this quite yet, because if you're thinking of pfSense, it's a virtual router, so it does need 2 network cards, one network adapter to go onto the internet, and another one for our private network. We will need to make some changes to our VirtualBox before we can enable that. Let's go to File and Tools and Network Manager. And what I want to do is I want to create a host-only network that's private, that only certain machines have access to, and that definitely does not have access to my main network. So let's create a network here, and it's just added it and called it number 2. So now that we've added a second adapter, we see that it's not set up for DHCP, which is good because we don't want that to be handing out IP addresses. Let's head back to pfSense. Let's go to Settings, and let's go under Network and adapter number 2. We'll enable that, and we're going to drop this down and select our host only adapter. And we also want to make sure that we're using the adapter number 2. And let's hit OK. Now we can fire up pfSense. Once you start the virtual machine, it should automatically go into the Linux installation process. We'll accept. We'll do install pfSense. We'll do auto ZFS. And let's check to make sure that not doing anything crazy here. All right, good. We're on striped with no redundancy. And we'll go ahead and check this hard drive here. We'll hit the space bar, hit OK. And now we'll go to proceed with installation, hit enter, and then yes. And that is all you have to do to set up a software firewall. We're going to reboot. So before this boots up, let's stop this. I'm going to hit the X button and power off the machine. After I've stopped the machine, I do want to disconnect the ISO so it won't boot to the ISO every time. Let's go to settings. Let's go to storage. Let's drop this down over here. And we're going to click on the little blue CD icon, and we're going to remove disk from virtual drive. And hit OK. And now let's start it again. And it should boot straight into our virtual firewall. So pfSense is going to attempt to configure itself and not ask you too many questions. And we'll be able to confirm everything is working once it finishes this initial boot process. This is as long as it will take, since it is configuring everything for us since it's the first time it's run. So this initial screen is giving us a lot of really good information. It's giving us the IP address that it is established on our private network, our LAN address, as well as our WAN IP address. The only way for us to access this currently is to create a virtual machine and change its networking adapter to host only. And then our pfSense will give out an IP address in this range, and we can go to it like any other normal firewall. So now let's move on to installing Remnux so we can get that out of the way. We can minimize pfSense for now. And for Remnux, let's go to File and Import Appliance. And we're going to navigate to our desktop and open up our Remnux OVA file. I'm going to click Next. We don't have to do too much with this configuration right now. We will be changing some of the network settings once it's done installing. So let's click Finish. Now that we've finished deploying our Remnux, we do have to make the same change that we made with pfSense to the network adapter. So let's go under Settings. Let's go under Network. Let's drop this guy down, click on Host Only Adapter, and make sure that we're on number 2. Hit OK. So for this next step, I kind of get bored because I know Flare's going to take forever to finish. So I went ahead and just created a Windows 10 machine so that I can show you how to set up pfSense. This is an unnecessary step. We could always have waited until Flare was done and then completed this step. But I want to make the most of your time, so let's go ahead and I'll show you how to set up pfSense. Okay, for our Windows 10 temp machine, I want to make sure that I'm on the same network. So let's go under Settings, and let's go under Network, and just like we did with Remnux and pfSense, let's change this to host only and change the adapter to number 2 and hit OK. And now let's power on our Windows 10 machine. All right, let's sign into our temporary machine. Thank you, Bob, for letting us use your computer. And let's open up a web browser. And let's navigate to the IP of our pfSense server, which I can see is 192.168.1.1. All right, we'll hit Advanced and Proceed. And we're going to be using admin and pfSense. And this will start the setup wizard. So we're just going to go through this pretty quickly. We can call this router. And for the DNS servers, I'm going to specify Google servers so that I know it's not going to be filtered. I'm going to hit Next. Next for the time server. And for the WAN, I'm going to leave at DHCP. And Next. And for the LAN, I'm going to configure this to be 99.1, but it can be pretty much anything you want it to be. I'm going to hit Next. And for the admin password, I do want to make it something complex because if somebody does get into my network, I don't want someone to gain access to my router and make changes. And generate a nice strong password. Paste and paste, next. And now we're going to reload. So what's going to happen here in a minute is I'm going to lose my IP address because I changed it, and my computer's probably not going to pick it up really quickly. So I'm going to open up a command prompt. So now I'm going to release and renew my IP address. ipconfig space release, and then ipconfig space /renew. And if all goes well, I should get a 99 IP address. And there we go. Now I'm going to change my IP address of my router that I'm accessing. I can see over here that it's changed to 99.1. And advanced, proceed, and accept my license agreement. I do know that pfSense will try to route any and all traffic, and that includes traffic to my private network, which I do not want. I can test this theory by opening up a command prompt and trying to ping one of the IP addresses on my private network. And we can see that it is responding. So what I need to do is tell pfSense not to route any traffic to my private network that resides at 192.168.0.245. So let's go in here, and what we're going to do is we're going to make a firewall rule. So we go to firewall and rules. This will be for my LAN. I'm going to click on new, and I want it to be at the very top so it prioritizes it first. I'm going to block any traffic that's coming from the LAN on IPv4, and I want to specify any protocols. If I come down a little bit farther, I'm going to leave the source as any, and I'm going to specify the destination. I'm going to specify a network, and that network will be my 192.168.0.0, and it will be a /24, which means any of the IP addresses that end with one of these numbers will automatically be rejected. For description, I'm going to put block traffic to local IPs. And I'm going to save this and apply this change. Once this has been applied, we can test to make sure this is working by trying that ping. And I see that my ping is being blocked. But let's check to make sure that we can still ping addresses on the internet. And we can. Excellent. Now that we're done with that, we can move our Flare VM machine to this network and be relatively sure that it's not going to be able to access any of our private IP addresses. If you have other networks such as guest networks or anything else you want to block, you can just simply add more of these block rules. Let's check in on our Flare VM and see how it's doing. All right, looks like we have some good news. I have a log up here that's telling me all the things that happened. And if I minimize this, I can see that my machine has finished installing. And now we have to hit enter to exit. And we can see that our background has changed, and it's now a Flare VM machine. So what do we want to do now? Well, I don't want to have to go through that process again anytime soon. Let's shut it down and let's create a snapshot. Let's go under our 3 periods, snapshot. We're going to take a new one. We're going to just call this post Flare VM. And while we're at it, we're also going to shut down our pfSense server, and we're going to snapshot that as well. So while we're here, let's move our Flare VM machine over to the proper network. Under settings and under network, we're going to change this adapter to be our host only. And we're going to select number 2, hit OK. Now this computer will not have internet access until we have our pfSense running. But we've already configured that. Now we need to worry about Remnux. Remnux will emulate internet without actually providing it. So you can see what the malicious software wants to do without actually giving it internet. So let's go ahead and configure Remnux. We're going to start this one up. Okay, let's configure our network with Remnux, and we're going to set it for a static IP address since we won't have a DHCP server running on this network since pfSense will be turned off. One of the easiest ways to do this is to use nano, and we're going to edit the netconfig file. What we'll do is we'll type in sudo nano space /etc /netplan /01 netconfig.yaml. Once we're in here, we can see that our network adapter is set to a DHCP server. However, we do want to get rid of that. We're going to tell it no. And then we're going to type enter and then space all the way over here so that we're lined up with the DHCP. And we're going to type in addresses, colon, we'll put our brackets, 192.168.99.1/24, and then close bracket. You'll notice that I made this the same address as our pfSense server, since my plan is never to run these two machines at the same time. One will pass internet, and the other one is going to pretend to pass internet. I'm going to hit Control X and type in Y to save, and then enter. And now I'm going to reboot and see if it picked up my IP address. I can find out if it picked up my IP pretty quickly by just typing IP space A. And we can see that my IP address is specified. Let's move this aside and let's fire up our Flare VM machine. Now just keep in mind that we are not running that pfSense, so it's not going to hand out an IP address for this machine. But that's okay. I do want to make some changes. I do want to statically set it so I don't have to worry about picking up the right settings and if there's no DHCP server. For that, I'm going to hit start and then just type in run. And then type in control, which will pop me into my control panel. I'm going to find my network settings here. There we go. I go to my adapter. I'm going to right click on this and hit change properties. I'm going to change my IP address to something other than .1. So let's do 192.168.99.100. And the subnet's fine. For my gateway, I do want it to be 192.168.99.1. And then for my DNS server, I'm also going to do the same thing, 192.168.99.1. Hit OK here, and OK here. Now if I open my command prompt, I should be able to ping the Remnux server, and I am. Good. Since I have made a change here and one that I do want to stay, I'm going to power off this machine once more and take a snapshot. Now that we have that configured, let's set up our fake DNS server on Remnux so that we can see any traffic that's trying to get out. So with this, we're going to go ahead and type in fake DNS in the command prompt under Remnux. And now our fake DNS server is running. And we can see that there's a little bit of traffic trying to go out here. And this is from our Windows machine here. So let's sign in. And what we'll do is a test. We will open up command prompt and we're going to try to ping Google. And we're successfully pinging Remnux. So what that's doing is any address, anytime it tries to go out on the net, it's going to resolve back to Remnux, and we'll be able to monitor that traffic here. Or a better way to do that is also open up Wireshark and monitor this network traffic, and we can really see, what our machine is trying to do. So if you're trying to detonate some malware, this is a great place to find out, hey, where's the malware actually trying to get out to? Keep in mind, Wireshark can be very loud. If you're looking for some good instruction on how to use Wireshark, check out Chris Greer's YouTube channel. Amazing guy, super smart, and will really up your game as far as Wireshark. What I want to do now is I want to download some malware and just go ahead and execute it, show you what it looks like, show you what kind of results you'll get from Remnux. So I want to make sure that Remnux is turned off so that I can turn on my pfSense. That's going to be my gatekeeper to the internet. So if I know pfSense is turned off, I know that there's internet is not going to go out, and Flare VM's not going to be able to get out on the net without that machine running. So let's stop our fake DNS. I'm going to Control C that. I'm going to shut down this Remnux for now. And I'm going to come back here into our VirtualBox, and I'm going to power on pfSense so that I can get out on the net with Flare VM. All right, now that our pfSense server is up, let's test it, make sure we're getting out on the internet. And we are. I can ping Google. Let's open up Chrome. And we're out on Google. So now, as promised, let's find some malware and let's detonate it in our virtual environment. One place that I found that has a whole bunch of really good malware is the Malware Zoo. This is the GitHub full of different malware that we can download. So I'm going to go to malware. I'm going to open this up a little bit. I want to get binaries. Once we're in here, let's do a search for one that I know is going to be fun for us to run, and that is Wannacry. I'm going to download the raw, and Chrome does not like that, but that's okay. We know better, Chrome. So we've downloaded Wannacry. Let's minimize our browser, and let's extract this guy. So I'm going to right click on him, go to 7-zip and extract. Most all of these files are going to be password protected with the password of infected. And once that's successfully extracted, we're going to go into our folder. Here's Wannacry. Now we're ready to detonate our malware. The question is now, do you want to see where Wannacry is reaching out to? In that case, let's shut down pfSense and fire up Remnux, and then we can monitor the network traffic. So I'm going to halt this machine here, and I'm going to fire up my Remnux and get ready to detonate. All right, I'm going to fire up my fake DNS. All right, we're listening and responding. Now I'm going to run Wannacry. I can already see I have a bunch of new files. So what did we notice here? I ran Wannacry, but it didn't reach out to the internet. And that's because some malware doesn't. Some malware will not connect out to the internet. It still served its purpose. It's encrypted my computer. All my files are encrypted. And in order for me to get them unencrypted, I will have to pay. But the great thing about running this in a virtual environment that's walled off is the only thing that I have to do to revert back to a pre-encrypted state. I'm just going to X this out at the top here. And I'm going to come down here and go to power off the machine and restore current snapshot to post static IP. I hit OK. And our machine is now fully restored. I'm going to start it back up again. And I'm going to go back to the Malware Zoo, and I'm going to try to find one that will send us some interesting network traffic. All right, I downloaded some different ransomware called Locky. Let's see if this guy gives us something interesting to look at. Some of this malware you'll have to add an extension to. All right, let's run this. So we can look and we can see that Locky does try to access several different domains. So when we're writing our malware analysis report, we can report that these domains are known to be malicious and associated with Locky. I assume that Locky is probably still doing something sneaky in the background. However, I've gotten my information from this one, and there are other tools that we can use to track down what all it's doing in the background. However, those tools are typically better to run before you execute your malware. So let's close this down and let's restore to our post-malware state. I'm going to wrap up this video by pointing you to an extremely helpful resource that will help you learn and perform malware analysis using the tools that you just installed. The YouTube channel I suggest you go to is HuskyHacks, and he has a 5-hour course on malware analysis. Takes you through using Flare VM Remnux to its fullest extent. But if you have any questions I can answer for you, please leave them down below. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.